I'm just going to give a brief overview of what's happening within WorkSafe and what are the things that you may need to be aware of as we move forward over the next 6 to 12 months. So briefly today I'm just going to talk about what's happening nationally, what's happening in Tasmania, some initiatives, our role in incident investigation that's moved a little bit in recent times, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that and give you the opportunity to ask some questions. So, like any organisation, WorkSafe Tasmania has a strategic plan, runs from 2018 to 2023, and the focus of that is very much around reducing harm across the state and within industry, in some internal measures in regards to culture and capability, regulatory frameworks that we operate in. WorkSafe administers somewhere in the order of about 19 pieces of legislation, and then we've also got a focus on our internal, making sure that we are the best we can in doing what we do and servicing industry. Just briefly delving into the transport sector is our focus within the targeted harm area. We run programs and those programs are focused on areas where we have the opportunity to maximise our impact with our limited resources. You'll see the pictures along the bottom clearly identify those industries to which we are up above and are the priority moving forward, and you'll see the little truck at the end which suggests that the transport sector falls into our priority industries. So just from a national perspective, we know we have some issues in regards to harm within the transport sectors. We have 80 people killed a year, 4,000 workers injured. Generally we've got an industry that needs or is not shy of injuring people in the course of their employment. And what we need to do is to work together with industry to see if we can minimise the harm that's caused. This information was available through Safe Work Australia. It provides a national perspective. We zip down into the Tasmanian picture. The key measures that we're looking at here, and this is 2018 data, so we've got 329 injuries across the sector. And our incident rate for serious injuries is quite high. Old data, the main reason for showing this slide is that we then move into 2019 and we look at the same numbers and they're telling us that not much is changing between 2018 and 2019. So we'll then go to the next year and we'll see again that there's not much happening in that space in regards to seeing any level of improvement or change in regards to what the performance is. So the takeaways on that are primarily we've still got about 4 to 5% of the workforce operate in the transport industries. Injuries are remaining stable. The frequency rate is increasing, it's moving from 9.3 to 10.2 in regards to for every million hours worked. And the majority injuries are truck drivers are staying the same, so we're not seeing much of a movement in that space. And our incident rate over the 10-year average is declining. So my question to you is this consistent with your businesses? Are you seeing any improvement in the management of your work health and safety? If not, we've got a solution for you. So from WorkSafe's perspective, we as a priority industry, we've been working with the transport industry for many years, but as a consequence of COVID, we've backed away from that. Our resources have been diverted into trying to work through and help businesses adapt to the pandemic. And I will just divert a little bit from here. We all know that there's lots of challenges on the mainland in regards to COVID, and we need to, as a state, we've been pretty fortunate in regards to our exposure. But I think it would be appropriate to recognise that the risk of actually COVID coming into the state is still quite high, and certainly for those of you who have got COVID safe plans for your business and are working through and have developed them back early over the last 18 months or so, probably a good time to start reviewing and seeing how they would stand up with the overlay of the Delta variant. Delta variant is far more a higher risk. It's easier to transfer across people, and given that the industry generally would be classed as an essential service, and we're seeing across the country that lockdown is a typical response when we get community transfer. So what we're looking at is you can expect to get a very short amount of time before the state goes into lockdown, and your industries are put into additional compliance type or contingency type roles in regards to how you respond. So I'm not going to dwell too long in how you go about that. I'm sure you've all got plans in place. I'm just suggesting that it would be a useful time to review those plans, make sure that you've got the controls in place in order that if we do find ourselves in a situation where we are getting the virus into Tasmania, that you're well prepared to respond should we be put into the situation where we go into lockdown. So what COVID did was divert all our resources away from all the things that we wanted to do and the work health and safety activities that we needed to focus on. We've now got moving out of that phase. We've got a dedicated COVID unit within WorkSafe Tasmania that's starting to work and have an impact across various industries. It's available to assist businesses to, if they want to review their COVID safe plans and work through making sure that businesses are best prepared. You know, the time spent in preparing to deal with COVID will hopefully minimise the time we spend in lockdown and dealing with the virus. The 2021 program, we're kicking off with a new transport focus later on this year, and it's about inspectors going out and talking to industry in regards to how they're managing their work health and safety risks. So getting back onto focusing on those injuries, getting back focusing on those issues that are resulting in people getting injured at work and the deaths on the road. So we're ensuring that that the businesses have gone through and done their risk assessments, that their workers are adequately trained, that controls are being applied effectively, and that controls are monitored to make sure that they're having the impact to mitigate the risks that come with the roles and the tasks that people need to perform. And certainly our role with our inspectors going out in the industry is to work with companies to make sure that those requirements are being met, and that if there is some assistance needed, then we're able to provide guidance in respect of what needs to be done. Our overall goal being less people being harmed. To see those year-on-year numbers that aren't moving very much, we want to start to put a bit of dent in that and turn that around. And we'll be working quite closely with industry over the next 12 to 18 months to start to see some movement in that space. In regards to serious incident investigation, so if you're in the unfortunate situation where somebody or one of your vehicles is involved in an incident, typically the first response is dealt with by Tas Police as the lead agency on public roads, and you'll also have the National Heavy Vehicle regulator involved in regards to the initial response and investigation of the incidents. But WorkSafe Tasmania also has a role, and this is primarily being driven through the Coroner's Office expecting that WorkSafe participate in investigations and able to provide advice to the Coroner in respect of incidents and those work-related factors that apply. So the Work Health and Safety Act provides us with a means to, or the jurisdictional involvement. Section 8 is the meaning of a workplace. A workplace is a place where work is carried out for business or undertaking, and includes any place where the worker goes or is likely to go whilst at work, and it specifically identifies a vehicle. So if you've got one of your vehicles involved in an incident, then chances are we have jurisdiction in respect of responding to an incident in that space. Your duty to notify is defined under Section 38 and clearly identifies that if you're a PCBU or a person conducting a business or undertaking, you need to inform the regulator of an incident that you become aware of, and it then goes on to talk about the means from which you need to do that, but I won't dwell on that. Section 35 defines what a notifiable incident is, so the death of a person, a serious injury or a dangerous incident. So even if your worker or your driver isn't injured, but somebody else is, it still comes into the jurisdiction of notifying and being involved and involving us in that process. So bystanders and others impacted by your workplace fall within our jurisdiction. Serious injury, that's defined within the legislation, so immediate treatment as an inpatient in hospital. So if you just have a fender bender, don't need to know about that, but if we're talking about somebody who's been knocked over or hit by a vehicle and they've gone into hospital or they've suffered any one of those injuries, then there is an obligation as on the PCBU to notify us. You notify by calling our response number, 1300 366 322, and we will then collect that information so that you're able to, and we'll start to investigate. As I said, we won't be going to the incident scene typically, as if it's on a public road, because police take the lead in that space. We do, there are some exceptions. If police request us to attend a scene, we will go, but typically the work that we do in regards to investigating the contributing factors and the potential causes of the incident rely more about what's in your workplace. So what happens when you notify? So the police attend the scene. We typically won't, as I mentioned. Our focus will be very much on the workplace-related factors that may have contributed to the incident, and this may include, but is not limited to, obtaining information in respect of employment contracts, timesheet, work activities, induction, licensing and training records, details of plans and equipment involved in the maintenance of equipment, work instructions, policy, the list goes on. Now, typically what will happen if you are in that unfortunate situation where someone has been seriously injured at work in a vehicle incident, you'll probably be asked to provide information to the heavy vehicle regulator, possibly Tas Police, and possibly us. So I suggest that when you go through and you're starting to manage that, you need to keep and collect that information and have it available to whoever asks for it. From our perspective, that's the information that we focus on, because they're the things that we can make an assessment on and provide a report back to the coroner around. This is what we found in regards to the workplace-related factors. Police will focus on the weather conditions, the road conditions, the driving conditions and all that sort of stuff, and typically the heavy vehicle regulator will focus on the vehicle safety and the other areas that go with that, but there will be crossover, okay? There's no real fine line, so therefore the information will probably need to be shared across multiple regulators. Okay, so that concludes my very brief and to the point presentation. So any questions?
Right, through all these lockdowns and that, do you expect some of the transport statistics to change much? Like if the general, let's face it, with trucks, most of the accidents with the general public, so if the general public are staying home, hopefully, it's safer for them. What do you think is going to happen with results?
I wouldn't like to predict what's going to happen in regards to COVID response. Certainly as a state, I'm aware that there are a whole range of plans and strategies being put in place. I suspect that if we were to get community transfer, then we would go into lockdown very quickly. And I think we've seen from other jurisdictions that if you go down quickly or go into lockdown quickly and stay in for a period of time, then you can come out if you can get it under control. So yes, I think the logic is good. If people aren't using their cars and the trucks have got free to use the roads as they see fit, then that's certainly a good place to be. But for how long that would last and whether it would have a noticeable impact on the statistics that we're talking about, who knows. But certainly from a business perspective, working out what your business would look like in the event of lockdowns. How do you manage people, your drivers going to other businesses? How are you keeping them safe? How are you stopping them from crossing over in your depots so that they're not bringing the risk of potential transfer across workers? All those sorts of things are a really good time now to be reviewing on the basis that I think Delta adds an additional dimension and an increased risk, so therefore the opportunity to question and challenge and see whether or not the systems and processes you've got in place will work is timely.
Brad, a couple of questions for you, mate. Number one, you mentioned the relationship between the NHVR and you guys.
Yes.
I assume there's some sort of like-minded situation with AMSA, CASA and that sort of situation, the rail regulator as well, because we've got people here from rail and AMSA as well. Oh, not AMSA, but obviously maritime. And the second question is, can you just touch on site preservation and specifically what you would like to see from us if it is a road-related incident? How can we maintain a site given that you're not coming out?
Okay, so in regards to the first question, we have relationships with a range of other regulatory bodies. We meet frequently with AMSA and our colleagues from Comcare and the Rail Safety Regulator and the National Transport Commission and all that. So there is an infrastructure and a network there. They're probably pretty loose because we don't have a high amount of interaction all the time in those areas, but we certainly have MOUs or memorandum of understandings and those sort of things that we're able to operate under. In regards to your second question, the issue around scene preservation, I think the first important point is actually notifying. So you've got to actually notify, and then at that point in time we will give you instructions in regards to what needs to occur in that area. Obviously police will be in attendance and responding because preservation of life and dealing with the issues that come from those sort of incidents are priority one, and there are provisions within the legislation that allow scenes to be altered in order to respond to and provide medical care to people. So that side of it's covered without too much drama. We will tell you whether we're going to respond, and we will tell you at that time, and typically we won't respond, as I've indicated, unless there's a reason for us to respond, and typically you'll also be given the clearance we will release the scene over the phone. So from that perspective, we're not in a situation where we need to go to site to release the scene. You'll ring up and you'll inform us of the details, and then we will say we're not responding and you're free to use, the scene is released. So it's a very quick, informal process. We're not likely to go into a situation unless police have actually come to us and said, we want you to attend because of whatever, I'm not sure what factors would arrive, but in those situations then there might be a conversation. But my understanding is employers don't control the scene at the sign of an incident. You know, police take over and it's on a public road and they manage it. Does that answer your question?
I might just follow up. What if the motor vehicle accident has occurred either on a private road or alternatively in a warehouse environment, such as in a large depot situation?
Again, if it satisfies the requirement of a notifiable incident, pick up the phone, tell us. If we will tell you whether we're going to respond. If we are going to respond, then you'll be instructed to preserve the scene. If we're not going to respond, the scene will be released.
Just following on from Ferdy's question and also the one previously on truck or on licensing, or if you lose your licence, if you run a retail truck workshop and there's an incident with an unlicensed mechanic driving a heavy truck, where does WorkSafe sit as far as the licensing of that person when it's on your premises?
Good question. So just to be clear on the circumstances, you've basically got a mechanic who is operating the plant but doesn't hold a licence. Is that what the crux of this question is?
Yeah, so I'm the GM for Webster Trucks.
Yep.
So I've got 70 mechanics, and basically I've made it mandatory in our business that they must hold a truck licence to operate, you know, that vehicle. But there's always been conjecture whether they actually have to have a licence or not on public property.
Yep. Yeah.
And the licensing is very expensive now, so it's a commercial decision that we've got to make.
So I would suggest as a PCBU, there's a couple of issues. One, the licence is required to operate the vehicle on a public road. But when you put it into the workplace environment, so private environment, you do need to make sure that those people are competent to operate that plant and equipment. Do they need a licence? Unless it's specifically detailed in the legislation, the answer I would suggest is no, but the onus would be on you to be able to demonstrate that that person is competent to move that vehicle, operate that vehicle in a manner that they were and how, depending on how the incident occurred.
Yeah, we just get down to that definition of, are we deemed to be a public road because we have the public come onto our location as a retailer, and that's where some of the complexity comes in with the interpretation. So we've just said we all have to be licensed to operate that truck, and relying on the competency is sort of our secondary position if there was something to happen. But
yeah, I would think as a PCBU, as you know, you're there to mitigate risk. I would think that's quite a reasonable way of mitigating that risk, and particularly if you've got such a large volume of operators in an environment, and you've got the public moving around, then it sounds like you've taken an approach which is appropriate to mitigate the risk that comes with it. But ultimately, there's an option there you'd need to explore in regards to what the risk is, and how you would determine how you'd respond.
Any further questions?
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Brad. Thank you.